3, 2, 1, go! Now we're live.
Hi, welcome to Better Utah Broadcast. My name is Katie Matheson. I am the Communications Director here at Alliance for a Better Utah. And today we have our usuals on. We have Lauren Simpson, who is our Policy Director. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thanks. Yeah.
Hi, thanks.
Hi, thanks.
And we have Chase Thomas, our Executive Director. Hi, Chase.
Hi.
And as you will notice, we all have the title of Director so that we all feel very important in our jobs.
We're all part of the millennial generation. We all have to have things that make us feel special.
We give out monthly trophies as well, while also killing the trophy industry. There was something.
What was that button that you came up with? Greatest snowflakes on Earth.
Yes.
Yes, we're the greatest snowflakes on Earth, and therefore we all are called Director. Great. Okay. So in the past, for this past year, we've done a lot of these Better Utah broadcasts with special guests on, and we will continue to bring special guests on. But we found that we decided that we wanted to kind of change the format of this, and so what you're going to be seeing is the staff on these broadcasts every Wednesday, and we're going to give you kind of a rundown of what's happening in Utah news and sometimes national news if one of our lovely members of Congress makes national news, which they have recently, and so we will be giving you our takes on those.
Breaking down the news.
Breaking down the news because hot takes are so hot we couldn't just leave them on Twitter. Oh! All right, but before we begin, we have to play Is This Real Life? This is how I torture my colleagues, and I make them play this with me every week.
And I always win.
No, you won once. All right, first one. Oh, of course, if you haven't watched, I read a headline. Some of them are real, some of them are fake. And these guys who have never seen these headlines before, hopefully, have to guess.
Play along in the comments.
Play along in the comments. All right. First one. You guys are going to know this one. Gender reveal stunt sparked 47,000-acre wildfire that did $8 million in damage.
It's true.
That's unfortunately true.
That one is true, yes.
Let's go shoot something while we have a wildfire.
Was it in Arizona?
Yeah.
I think it was in Arizona, and they were out. So
I don't claim Arizona anymore as my home state.
Right. I mean, if you're going to shoot something in the summer, maybe don't do it in a dry field. Because it was in this just dry, barren field.
But second amendment.
Kindling.
Yeah, right. What'd you say?
Nothing. I don't want to spark controversy.
Spark. All right, next one. Alligator-like creature in New Jersey was escaped iguana.
That's not true.
No.
That's totally true.
Oh,
Is it?
That's totally true.
I'm so tired of alligator stories.
Right?
So
and it wasn't in Florida. That's why I thought it wasn't true.
I got you with that one.
But Jersey is the Florida of the North.
That's hilarious because I lived in New Jersey for 10 years, and there are specific parts of New Jersey that we call the south of the north.
Oh, well.
The north, actually, funnily enough, the northernmost part of the state, I was calling the south of the north. Anyway, so there was this this iguana, which was orange, and about like this big, and I guess it escaped from somebody's house, and was just...
Who has a giant, terrarium? Where do iguanas live?
I mean, I had a snake when I was a kid. Like, people like reptiles.
Yeah, but it wasn't like slithering around your house.
No, but it had escaped its cage once.
That's nice.
Don't underestimate reptiles. Anyway, so this orange iguana was sitting there like sunbathing on somebody's porch, and they got so freaked out that they called the cops. So, there you go.
The more you know.
Yeah. I mean, I was laughing about it because it seemed so dumb. However, if I saw an iguana just sitting there on my porch, I might have freaked out too. All right, next one. Florida man missing after an alligator hunt 2 years ago turns up at McDonald's.
False.
Dang.
You tried too hard.
I tried too hard with that one. Florida and alligator in the same one.
The McDonald's threw it over the edge.
Dang, okay. Whale carcass found on farm in Farmington, Utah.
True.
What? How? False.
So, it's false and true. Got you with that one. So the reason is it was actually a hoax article from 2014, and people kept sharing it as if it was real, and it never actually showed up.
So it was false.
I had seen that.
Right, that's the thing. It was a headline,
yes,
but it was actually technically the legitimate case of fake news.
Gotcha.
But the game is whether or not it was a true headline.
Never work with lawyers.
I don't think that's...
No, it was. It was whether it's a true headline.
That's true. You both win. We give everyone trophies here. All right. Next one. Rhinestone vest-wearing pigeon reunited with family.
False.
Oh, I hope that's true.
It is true.
Yes.
Everyone go watch it. It's hilarious. All right, last one. My favorite one. Dog scams McDonald's customers out of burgers by pretending to be a stray.
False.
That sounds true.
That's true.
Okay.
I don't know how you quantify a dog pretending to be a stray, but there's a drive-thru and there are pictures of this dog sitting there outside going up to each door trying to scam hamburgers out of everybody. And the owner found out because, so this is from the article, the dog's owner caught the dog in the act when she drove to McDonald's and photographed and filmed her taking food from drive-thru customers. The dog approached the owner's car, but when she saw her owner was behind the wheel, she moved on to another car for food.
That's funny.
So this woman, the owner, put out like a warning on social media, "Don't feed my dog, he keeps escaping." I love canines.
I'm blaming my poor
That's
short
funny.
showing on the game today due to my illness.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. All right. We'll see what happens next week. All right. So let's get down to business. So that, of course, was our game. Is this real life? Just to bring a smile to everyone's faces when sometimes the news can be rough.
Horribly depressing.
Right. So, guys, let's talk about Prop 2. What happened? Give us a long and the short. I assume most of our audience knows what happened.
Well, if we're talking about Prop 2,
It passed. Right.
Yeah.
And it became law on December 1st. But that's where the story of Prop 2 ends, because now Prop 2 isn't the law.
It has been repealed and replaced with...
Oh, good job, Republicans. They were effective at repealing and replacing.
They did that well. So the governor called a
with the
special
help
session.
of one Democrat, so it wasn't just Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they could have done it without.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that later because I have some sympathy. Gene Davis has taken some heat on Twitter.
Taking more than some heat. He's taking
Yeah.
a lot of heat.
Uh-huh.
And like...
We're
So,
gonna talk about it later,
let's
or
back
talk about
up.
it now?
Well,
Let's get the...
we'll give the intro
Okay.
and then we should discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So the legislature met in a special session called by Governor Gary Herbert on December 3rd, and they passed a compromise bill that was assembled by support and opposition groups. Notably absent was Truths, who's a major advocate for Prop 2, but a lot of support and opposition groups, most notably the LDS Church, who's sort of the facilitator for this negotiation, came up with a compromise bill, went through a lot of drafts, and that passed the House and Senate and was signed into law all on December 3rd. So, in one day, Prop 2 was repealed and replaced. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And rebuilt.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, what are the biggest differences between Proposition 2 and the compromise, just in short sum?
So it doesn't. So the compromise bill, now the law, does not change that much about cultivation and it doesn't change that anything. I don't think about cultivation. The biggest changes are distribution. So the process of how I get my card, where I go to pick up my medical cannabis. It changes some of the illnesses that are covered, and let me think. What else does it change?
So it lowers the number of dispensaries,
Yes.
pharmacies. Whereas they all would have been private and there could have been over 30 of them. Now there's only 7 private pharmacies.
But it also
And
goes through the health department.
Yeah, so there's a central fill pharmacy that goes through the health department. So it's like a dual structure thing.
Public and private.
Yeah. So that's how it changes the dispensary stuff.
Okay. And in terms of the covered illnesses.
Yeah, so it adds some and it takes some away. So like under Prop 2, hospice care wasn't in there, but they added that with Prop 2.
With the
they
compromise.
Also, yeah.
Yeah.
With the compromise, they also added some clarifications on like what is chronic pain. But they also took out the broad categories like all other autoimmune disorders and some others like that. So add some, took some away.
So now it's sort of like a weird situation where if I have lupus, that's an autoimmune disease that's not covered under Prop 2, but because of my lupus, I probably also have chronic pain, which is covered under the compromise. So it's a little unclear to me at this point how somebody gets a card.
Yeah.
I might have to go to my doctor and say, I have chronic pain. that's caused by this autoimmune disorder, but it's the pain that I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
the recommendation for medical cannabis for,
Mm-hmm.
and not just my diagnosis of lupus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now,
So-
what is the compassionate use board?
So that's like the catch-all. So if your doctor feels like you have a condition that doesn't squarely fall within one of the listed illnesses, then you can go to the compassionate use board, and it's a board of doctors, physicians, and stuff who will decide whether or not you qualify.
Mm-hmm.
There are drawbacks to that. It only meets every 3 months, so it's timing. Also, you have to be 21 or older to automatically be able to go to the compassionate use board.
Mm-hmm.
Under that age, there are other loops you have to jump through. So it's good to have a catch-all, but there's also limitations to it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some amendments proposed in the Senate that would give the Senate oversight of the compassionate use board, which at the time everyone was like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. But Senate President Niederhauser didn't want to pass it because he was ready to go home, and they didn't want to send the bill back to the House.
Because the House had already left for the day, and so they would have had to come back for a second day of a special session.
They hadn't adjourned yet.
Oh, well, because you couldn't adjourn
Officially.
from a special session until you have it signed.
Oh, really?
But they had left for the day, so they would have had to come back. There are people that left.
Couldn't he just like say that he would get, who was it, the police to go and round up everybody from the House and bring
Yeah.
them back?
The Sergeant at Arms.
The Sergeant at Arms,
Yeah.
which is what he did to the Senate.
Yeah.
All right, great. So we have a question from our audience. Travis asks, how does the state legislature have the legal ability to override a proposition?
So that's a really good question. So a proposition, once it gets enough signatures, gets on the ballot, and then the people vote in favor of it, it becomes the law, but it's not, it doesn't have more weight than any other law.
It's just like any other law.
Yeah, the legislature has the ability to make changes to any law or to repeal any law. So it's on the books, but the legislature always has the ability to make changes to it.
Yeah, and that in the Constitution, Utah Constitution, it says that the people and the legislature have co-equal legislative authority.
Mm-hmm.
So the people can change laws that the legislature has made, but that means that the legislature can change laws that the people have made.
And that also means that this isn't necessarily a done deal. The legislature could go back and make further additions, right?
And that is
Most
most likely going to happen. Just kind of like what we see with alcohol laws every year, there are little tweaks. We will probably be seeing little tweaks to the Prop 2 compromise bill every year.
Yeah.
Are we going to be forcing the Department of Health to put "This is not Colorado" signs on their doors? Like, this is not a
This is
a
a Utah
restaurant.
dispensary,
Not a
Colorado.
Colorado. All right. So if you have more questions about the specifics of Prop 2 or the compromise, please feel free to ask us in the comments. We're going to kind of move on to...
but let's talk about Gene Davis.
Yeah, well, we're talking about Prop 2 still, but a different angle.
Okay.
And the question is, in terms of policy versus optics. So for me, for example, I think that one of the worst parts of this compromise is the optics of it, right? People are going in assuming things about powers that be in Utah, assuming that the legislature doesn't listen to the people, and then they go in and mess with this bill. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely bad optics. I mean, the reason why we had so many propositions on the ballot this year was just because people felt like the legislature wasn't acting in their interests at the speed that people wanted them to be acting. So for these to pass and then the legislature to come in and say, oh, well, we're going to start changing them right away. It's like, well, why couldn't you have put this one that you preferred in place 2 years ago? And also, why are you going against the will of the people? So yeah, bad optically for the people. It's bad precedentally. If people just assume that this is fine, then they could do this with any future proposition, saying, well, we did it then. Why
It's a
can't we do it
precedent
now?
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because I will say, in my opinion, the compromise bill is not terrible. I know there are some changes and like there are things about it that can be improved and should be improved in the future, but it really, like, Prop 2 was not gutted.
Yeah, for being
Like,
a compromise. It was
The
a good
compromise
compromise.
bill, it's actually a good piece of legislation. The problem is you have a lot of people who voted for the first time this year because they were excited about Prop 2. We have polling that shows that. And now those people are feeling like their vote didn't matter because the legislature just did what it wanted.
So in that way, it's almost a good government issue, right? In terms of, more of a civic engagement issue, right? So looking at it from the civic engagement side, I mean, we were, prior to 2018, 39th in the nation for voter turnout. I think we jumped up to somewhere in the 20s just from 2018 in terms of voter turnout. And a lot of that, of course, was thanks to Prop 2. And I think Senator Iwamoto mentioned this on the floor.
Yeah, she
and
did.
She was really concerned about all those first-time voters feeling like their vote doesn't matter. And that's, I mean, I think that was a valid concern. There's a lot of talk about that on Twitter and on Facebook. People just angry. They felt like their vote didn't matter. Do we think that's the case? Did their vote not matter in this case?
Here's what I would say. That compromise bill, like, after Prop 2 came out, you had all these opposition groups who were like, well, we don't like this specific bill, but of course we want medical marijuana. That would have never happened. You would have never had all these opposition groups, the LDS Church, come out supporting medical marijuana without Prop 2. So it's really frustrating that Prop 2 wasn't exactly what was passed. But like I said, the compromise isn't terrible. Like, those votes really mattered in terms of getting any sort of meaningful medical marijuana legislation on the books.
So I think that we can go ahead and say that votes, not just votes for Prop 2, but all of the effort that that groups put into it, Libertas, Truce, all of those groups who got it on the ballot in the first place, we can go ahead and say that was well worth the time and effort that was put in.
Well, and I'm sure Prop 2 brought out a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have voted, and that could have been what pushed over Prop 3 and Prop 4, Ben McAdams and CD4. So even if people feel like on that one issue it might not have mattered as much, I mean, I believe it did. It did help down ballot on other issues.
Right.
That's a really good point.
Right. And so now let's talk about something that is not talked about a lot but can make people kind of nervous. Oftentimes when these propositions are written, they're starting to write them years in advance, right? And so what happens is there are these tiny changes to code in state law that are included. They have like old versions of code included in these propositions. So it is not a bad thing necessarily for the legislature to go in and to fix those parts of the code that need to be updated. That's normal. That's just like things as usual, and they're not changing the intent of the propositions at all, right? Yeah. So we can probably expect some of that from Prop 3 and Prop 4. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, you're hearing from the governor and others about Prop 3 that they want to put safeguards on the funding. I'm not sure if there's technical changes. Nobody's talked about that, but they want to change the funding a little bit just to make sure it doesn't overtake an education budget or other things. Prop 4, we have no idea what they're going to be doing with. There could be technical stuff, but it seems like that's all new code rather than rearranging existing.
Okay. So basically, all changes are not created equal, right? So if we have a proposition, not all changes are created equal. So if you hear that changes are going to be made to a proposition, don't necessarily freak out initially. Wait until you see what exactly that change is going to be. Is that a good piece of advice?
Yeah, and I will say there will always be changes for any legislation, any proposition. So, yeah, like you said, some of it's just technical changes, and, like, that's a good thing.
Great. Keep the code up to date. Love it. All right. What if people... all of that aside, are still very upset about the changes to Prop 2, or about the replacement with the compromise bill. Should they disengage, or if we don't want them to disengage, how can they fix what they perceive to be a problem?
I feel like they should engage even more. Because just like we were saying, this isn't the end for the legislature messing with it. It shouldn't be the end for the people trying to mess with it. If you feel that your representative did good by voting against it, email them thanking them for voting against it.
Voting against the compromise.
Yeah, against the compromise. If you have a representative who voted for it and you didn't like that, email them. Start advocating for the small changes you would like to see. Write them a letter or an email saying, I would like this change made in this law because of such and such. It would affect me in this way. And I think now that we have a medical cannabis statute in place, people are going to get used to it. It's going to become part of society as it's set up. And it is going to be able to, I guess, be susceptible to change, to make it more accessible, make it broader, to affect more people, especially as we have studies that show that different people are affected in different ways and with different illnesses.
Great.
And one really recent example that we have of engagement making a real change is, so in the compromise bill, originally the only people who could prescribe or recommend medical cannabis were doctors or psychiatrists or PhD psychologists. And there was a committee meeting like a week before the special session, and so many people showed up. 70 people showed up, signed up for a public comment.
It was a 5-hour meeting.
The comment lasted 5 hours. It took so long.
Lauren was there.
And a lot, and the majority of those comments were opposed to the compromise. And one frequent concern that was raised was, like, this isn't a sustainable model. Like, why can't, APRNs or PAs recommend medical cannabis? Because to see a doctor, it takes, 3 months to get an appointment. And it's a lot easier for me to, go see my PA.
Especially in rural areas, too.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot less
Through
of this
telehealth.
stuff.
Yeah. Or to diagnose PTSD, an LCSW is more likely to be diagnosing PTSD in low-income people. And so, low-income people can't afford to see a psychiatrist to get that diagnosis.
Right.
And so that was one of the only final changes that was made to the compromise bill. And I feel like that's a direct result of that testimony at that meeting.
Of people showing up.
By showing up and engaging and sharing your concerns, that makes a difference.
Yeah. And I will say, from not the policy side, but just the engagement and activism side, we don't have we have municipal elections in 2019, but you'll hear a lot of elected officials say, the best, elections are job performance reviews. And if you have serious problems with how your elected official, your representative in the House or your senator, acted on this bill or their votes in general, even though 2019 is not an election year, this is the time to start, because they're going to be hearing a lot of noise in 2020, but in 2019 is the time for you to contact them, call them, comment on their posts on social media, let them know your thoughts. So don't disengage, engage further, and then bring in one other person to continue to engage.
And to add on to that, the legislative session is coming up. It's only about a month and a half away. But the time to start talking to your lawmaker about changes you might want to see in laws isn't when the leg session starts. It's right now. Once the legislative session starts, they're in meetings all day. They can't make appointments because they already have appointments for weeks. So if you want to talk to them, send them an email right now, call them on the phone, let them know concerns you might see in any type of law, and they'll be better able to help you now.
And we will be following the legislative session incredibly closely. Lauren will be up there every single day. We'll be up there a lot. We will be doing our Better Utah broadcasts from up there on the hill. So we will be alerting people. We'll have action alerts for the session, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the session and prop watch at the end of this segment. But first, I want us to go on and talk about our favorite Representative Chris Stewart. What did Chris Stewart do yesterday, Chase?
So Chris Stewart got on TV again, which normally when he's on cable news, it's always sticking his foot in his mouth lately. And that's because he's always defending Donald Trump for some strange reason, even though, 60% of Utahns?
Yeah, most Utahns
disapprove.
No, that's in the 4th District.
Oh, that was just the 4th District. Oh, well, it was close to
I think
a majority
it's about
also, right?
50-something disapprove. It's pretty, but there
statewide or in his district?
Statewide.
Because his district is going to have higher disapproval levels because it has all of Salt Lake in it.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be interesting to see.
No, because it's just a small portion of Salt Lake. Oh, yeah, Salt Lake proper, not Salt Lake County. Yeah.
So yeah, he got on TV. They were talking to him about how representatives and senators had gotten classified briefings on Khashoggi. Is that how you say his name? The Khashoggi murder in relation to Saudi Arabia. And I don't know the full context of the discussion because I haven't watched the entire clip yet. Mm-hmm. But at some point, as he was defending Trump's reaction, he was like, well, reporters disappear all the time. You see China does this, and Mexico, the 20 reporters have gone missing. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of just a...
well, it's not that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, just excusing reporters dying as if it happens all the time.
Not dying, being assassinated.
Well, yeah,
right.
Being assassinated, yeah. So just extremely, I don't know.
Almost flippant in the way that he...
Thank you for filling in words for me.
Yeah, and so this was coming hot off of some interviews with Senator Lindsey Graham, who was just... One day I want to read his biography because he's just such an interesting character. But he was saying... So he was briefed by CIA Director Haspel, who said... And basically he and others who sat in on this briefing said, yeah, there is no... Like, it is very clear that this assassination was ordered by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who is supposedly an allied nation to the United States. And Khashoggi was a U.S. resident. Not that matters, but that makes it almost that much worse. And so they're like, yeah, this is very clear, but that information that all those senators were talking about as they came out of this briefing was different from what Trump was talking about, and also Madison Pompeo. So there's questions about information, which is on par for this administration. But
well, it's not even a question about information. It's a question of how they interpret it, and then we relay that to the public.
Right.
We know Trump consistently lies.
Right.
So.
And so it was in that context that Stewart was asked these questions, and Stewart just kind of, excused whatever it was. And so we spoke out about it, and we were picked up on a couple some news coverage of it. But I mean, it's, for somebody who has such low name ID in his own district, Chris Stewart has very low name ID. A lot of people don't know who he is. This seems like a terrible way to make your name known, to defend someone that originally you called our Mussolini. So if you're watching and you're interested in the types of flip-flopping that Chris Stewart has done on Donald Trump, Chase wrote a great blog post about it, and I'll put it in the comments, about just kind of a timeline of Stewart's comments on Trump and on Russia in particular, because he's on the House Intelligence Committee, so he has a little bit more authority on that issue, and it's very interesting watching him talk about it.
Yeah. I'm thinking of making like a Twitter account that every day answers the question whether Chris Stewart is defending or opposing Donald Trump that given day.
Well, now everyone will know where it's come from. All right, so let's close out with talking again about the legislative session. This month, like last week, we introduced Prop Watch. Lauren, do you want to talk about Prop Watch?
Yeah, Prop Watch is on our website. Hashtag Prop Watch.
Every single time someone says Prop Watch, I'm like, hashtag.
Hashtag Prop Watch.
So that will be one of our main focuses this coming legislative session. We'll be keeping a close eye on the propositions, see if anything else is done to Prop 2, and seeing what the legislature does to Prop 3 or Prop 4. Some legislators have already threatened to sue over Prop 4, so we'll see what happens there. But we have a timeline that's up to date on everything that's happened, so you can understand the full story.
And on that as well, if you click through to the Prop 2 section, there's a really well done chart by Lauren contrasting what was in Prop 2 and what was in the compromise, just showing the little changes that were made. And we'll be putting in action alerts up on there, so if something does happen, so you can easily email your lawmaker with a click of a button or call them as well.
Right. I mean, one of our goals, which I will scream until I die for the legislative session, is to make it more accessible. Nobody has 45 days off of work, except for legislators, to go up on the Hill and spend all day searching through all this content. I mean, thousands of bills are put forward, right? And even if you did have the time, very few people have the know-how to even look at this bill and say, what is this saying? And so that's a big part of our role up on the Hill, is to just kind of be your eyes and ears and make sure that you know what's going on, and make sure that you're alerted to the stuff that you need to be alerted about. There's a lot of mundane stuff that goes on, and then sometimes there's something that pops up and we're like, and so we'll send out an alert, and you can engage that way.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I mean, just to build off of that, one of our overarching goals that these types of things fit under is we're up there to promote progressive policies and defend against bad policies. But we're such a small staff, we more or less observe and find out what's happening and then get the people involved because we can't do it on our own. We can't do it with our friend lobbyists up there. We have to have people calling in, sending emails, protesting when necessary because the people are the constituents. So get involved.
Great. And also, if you enjoy reading the intricacies of the daily ins and outs of what goes on up at the legislature, we will have a daily email update for what has happened that day and what is happening tomorrow. So the subscription is not open yet, right? It's hidden somewhere.
Yeah, you have to find it somewhere in our. It's like on our Better Utah on the Hill page. It's a little difficult to find right now, but we'll be putting it up on our homepage soon.
Yeah, so you can subscribe to those and get the daily updates, and they get more and more snarky as it goes on,
as we get less and less.
Yeah,
right.
Lauren and I will both be contributing to it this year, so it won't be all of my snark.
I mean, at the end, it's like there's not a single non-sarcastic sentence.
Yeah, we like to point out some of the fun stuff that happens, some of the I can't believe they just said that stuff that happens,
which is more
quite often.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also just everything you might need to know to get involved with the session.
Yeah, so if you have any questions or comments, you want to know how you can get more involved beyond that, or you just are so excited about that daily update that you want to subscribe before we open up subscriptions for the coming session, let us know and we can take care of that for you in a private message. Anything else? Nope. All right, great. We will see you all next Wednesday, 12:30. Bye.
Bye.
I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to talk.